Howdy, folks. This is your science lesson for this week while we are not seeing each other quite as much. So your job for this lesson is going to be to listen. While you're listening, you can choose to just observe, which means to just watch, or to take some notes and draw some pictures of what you're thinking about. When you're done listening, when the lesson is over, your job is to figure out some way to follow up. So remember, following up from a lesson means taking what you heard and doing something more with it. It might mean that you're writing or drawing about what you heard. It might mean you're going out into the yard to look for examples. It might mean that you're making a comic strip explaining how this scientific concept works. Or maybe it means you want to find a book or an article on the internet that gives you more information. Maybe you want to do an experiment. Just about anything works for follow-up as long as it is related to what the lesson was about, and it means that you're working on the idea a little bit more. So when this lesson's over, you're going to figure out a way to follow up. But for now, here's the lesson part. This lesson is about a scientific thing called phototropism. I'm going to write that word on the whiteboard so you can see what it looks like. Phototropism. It looks like this. If we take that word and break it down, like we generally do when we're trying to figure out what something means, we can break it into two parts. Photo means light. Tropism comes from a Greek word, tropos. Hear how they're kind of the same? And tropos means to turn. So phototropism means when plants turn towards the light. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at some examples and we're going to talk about how plants turn to the light. Why do plants turn to the light? All of that cool stuff. Phototropism, plants turning to the light. So to start with, let's think about plants. We know that plants are producers. They make their food themselves. They don't go eat anybody to get their food. They make their own food. And they make it using that process known as photosynthesis. Hear how it still starts with that photo bit? That means it involves light again. Photosynthesis is how plants take the energy of the sun, and inside the leaves, they do a chemical process and turn it into the energy that they need to grow and the energy that they store up in their bodies and we eat when we eat a plant. Now, because plants do photosynthesis, because they get their energy from the sun, they love the sun. Plants are obsessed with the sun. The sun is like their best friend. They would marry it if they could. They are all about the sun. And because plants are all about the sun, most plants are going to do their very best job of getting as much sun as they can. Because if they get more sun, they can make more energy. They can grow bigger. They can make more flowers. They can make more seeds. They can do a better job of being a plant. So plants are trying so hard to get to the sun. And when they bend or grow in a certain direction to get to the sun, that's the thing we call phototropism. So let's look at a couple pictures of what phototropism looks like. There's my shared screen. This is a picture of some daisies. Next time we're at school together, or maybe in your yard if you have some, we can look at the daisies and see if we notice phototropism happening. In this picture, you can tell that the daisies are leaning towards the sun, which means the sun has to be over here. Remember that the sun moves across the sky, right? It rises in one side, goes up and over, and then back down before it sinks at sunset. And so that means that during the day, the sun is moving around. The sun might start here, and as it moves across the sky, the daisies are going to bend themselves until they're pointing in the opposite direction. Some plants will move themselves every single day. You can see them bending themselves towards the light. Phototropism is happening. They are turning towards the light. Sunflowers are a great example of that too. Probably next fall, when our sunflowers that we plant in our garden are growing and are nice and big, that'll be something we can check out. So store that idea in your brain. We're going to look at the sunflowers moving towards the light when we're back at school together next fall. So those daisies are doing phototropism. They are bending towards the light. Here's another little plant. Look at this little plant. It is doing such a good job of staying alive that it's growing in a tiny crack in the pavement somewhere. Take a minute and look at that plant and decide in your own head before I draw it where the sun is in the sky. Where's the sun in that picture if the plant is leaning towards it? The sun's got to be somewhere over here, right? Because the plant is bending towards the sun. Here's one more to look at. This one is going to be a video. Ready? We're going to watch a time-lapse video. What that means is that someone set up a camera to observe a plant all day long. And then when they were done observing the plant on the camera for hours and hours and hours, they sped up the video. Like they put it in super speed so that you don't have to sit and watch the plant for hours and hours and hours. I'm going to share my screen and show you this one. These are just some little bean plants that they planted in a jar. This is an experiment that we could do together at school. This is an experiment that you could do at your house. Ready? Watch phototropism happening. This is happening from the whole day. So before it starts, think about where the sun is. These little plants are definitely bending in one direction. They are definitely bending towards the sun. Our sun is right here. And let's turn it on and go. Why will it not let me press it? Ah, there we go. This probably has been about 3 hours already that they've sped it up. Pardon. Check it out. They're almost straight up and down. It's around noon now. It's around lunchtime. The sun is high in the sky. And now we're heading into afternoon. It's starting to sink back down towards the horizon. And those little bean plants are bending towards it so their little leaves can get as much light as they possibly can. So their leaves can do as much photosynthesis as they can possibly manage. Pretty cool, huh? Now, here's the next part. We know that they can bend. We just watched them bend. We saw some pictures of them having bent towards the sun. But how do they do it? This is a bit tricky, so don't worry if you're like, what's going on here? You can start with the idea of just knowing that plants grow towards the light and plants can bend towards the light. But if that idea is something that you're like, yeah, I got that, that feels good, then check this out, because this is pretty cool. How do plants bend towards the light? Well, if we draw ourselves a little plant, we can explore that idea. At the very tip of a plant's stem, there are some special things called photoreceptors. Let's imagine this is our little plant stem. There are photoreceptors in the tip of the stem. Think about the word photoreceptor. It starts with photo, so that means light is involved, right? Receptor comes from the same place as the word receive. When you receive something, you're getting it. A photoreceptor is like a little sensor that senses the sun. It absorbs the sun and it tells something new to happen. When the photoreceptors in the tip of the stem sense the sunlight, they release a chemical that runs to the dark side of the plant. Let's add a sun here. Here's our sun. So when the photoreceptors sense that there is sunlight and they receive that sunlight, they're going to release a little chemical called auxin. And that chemical is going to be released from here and then run down the dark side of the plant. It's repelled by the light. It tries to stay as far from the light as it can. When it gets to the dark side of the plant, it starts a crazy process. First, it releases hydrogen atoms, which change the pH of that side. Don't worry if you don't know what that stuff is, but older folks who've been talking about pH, it changes the pH over here. The pH drops. It becomes more acidic. When the pH drops, that triggers another thing. It's kind of like a domino relay. Each thing triggers something new. That triggers the release of an enzyme. An enzyme just means, in science words, a thing that makes things happen. It releases an enzyme called expansin. Do you hear how expansin sounds like expand? Sometimes when people name enzymes, they give them really obvious names. It releases expansin, and expansin makes the cells swell up. The cells get bigger. When the cells get bigger, they start pushing against each other on this side, and they cause the stem to bend like this. They make the stem bend and change its shape. Let's delete our old stem. Then the stem bends towards the sun because all of that expansin caused the cells on this big, long, curvy side right here to get bigger, to expand. When they got bigger, they pushed the stem over. This process happens over and over and over again anytime a plant is turning towards the sun. First, the sun hits the photoreceptor. Then the photoreceptor releases the auxin. Then the auxin runs to the dark side. Then when it's over there, it lowers the pH, which releases the enzyme called expansin, which swells the cells, which causes the plant to move. That is a lot going on inside that plant to make phototropism happen. I think that's pretty cool to think about all the things that are happening inside of a plant when we see it move. Here's a little picture that someone else made showing kind of the same idea. They didn't show all the steps, but you can see that when the sunlight is right up above, there is no dark side. So the auxin moves everywhere equally and it doesn't bend. But when the sun moves to one side, then the auxin molecules move to the dark side and it causes the plant to bend. Now, all the plants we've looked at so far are plants that do this work every day. They bend following the light. But sometimes there are plants that bend in a much slower way. Things like trees can't go bending back and forth every single day because they have those hard woody stems. It's only things with soft stems that can bend back and forth every day. When a tree does phototropism, instead of bending every day, it changes the direction it grows. Maybe you've been in the forest before and you've seen a plant, a tree, that starts to grow upward and then looks like it bends and grows off in a weird direction. Look at this tree. This tree started growing and then realized it was planted underneath part of this building. It wasn't going to get enough sunlight. And so as it grew, the plant bent towards the sun. Here's another one. Look at the branch of this tree. I'm going to draw over it in pink to show you which one I mean. Look at this branch. If it had grown straight up, it would have grown into the middle of all of the rest of this tree mess. And it would have been shaded by a lot of those older branches, by a lot of the bigger branches that were already there. So when the little photoreceptors at the tip of its stem up here sensed that the light was mostly coming from off on the side, off over this lake, it made that branch grow out. It made the little bit of growth that the plant did every single day happen towards the light. And once this plant was in the light enough, then it started growing up again. You can see lots of examples of this. There might even be some in your yard if your yard has shady areas and sunny areas. But if you don't have that, keep an eye out next time you're in the forest. Keep an eye out for this phototropism. Here's another example of a tree that was trying to grow, and the place that it was supposed to grow, where its seeds and its roots started, was in the shade. There was probably a big old tree back here in the background that shaded it out. And so because of that, the plant grew towards the sun. It grew out to an empty space in the forest where the sunlight could shine down on it, and it could do its work of photosynthesis, and it could grow more easily. Pretty neat, huh? That is our lesson for today, phototropism, when plants grow or bend towards the light. They bend towards the light when they're little things with soft stems, and they grow towards the light when they are things with harder, woody stems that can't bend back and forth every day. So now you're ready to follow up. Draw a picture, make a comic, write something, get some pipe cleaners and make a little plant and show it bending back and forth to the sun, or go outside and explore. Whatever feels good to you works for me. You finish this assignment by either posting a picture of your follow-up or writing me a little note that says what you did. I went and explored in my yard and I looked at the daisies and I saw that they were pointed one direction in the morning. And when I came back in the afternoon, they were pointed the other direction. That would be an example of something you could do. Maybe you want to plan an experiment. Whatever works for you is a great choice. And if you aren't sure what to do, remember, you can go visit Austin in his Zoom room and he can help you figure out some ideas too. I'll see you in a couple days. Bye, everyone.